Welcome, everyone. Well, I just want to start off by saying thanks for coming to our first Technapex Education Tech Mixer hosted by TriplePoint. I'm Molly from TriplePoint, and I'm really excited for the turnout. I'm blown away. This is amazing. So today we have some great panelists who are EdTech entrepreneurs themselves, and I think they'll do a better job of telling you what they're all about. And we have Josh Constine from TechCrunch here to moderate. So welcome, Josh.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so as Molly said, I'm Josh Constine from TechCrunch. Thank you guys all for coming out for the panel. I cover startups, mostly focusing on social products, and whether it's teachers to pupils or peer-to-peer, education technology is often very social, so I'm well familiar with that. And so I want to let you guys learn a little bit more about the great companies we have here today. So why don't you give a quick introduction to you and what you do?
Sure. My name is Farb Nivi. I'm the founder of Grockit. We do social learning online in a bunch of different formats, including test prep and working on videos and collaborative, student-to-student Q&As. So that's basically it. Social learning facilitated through technology.
So we'll go through a little deeper in a second, but why don't you start with the intro?
I'm Allison. I'm the co-founder and CEO of InstaEDU. We are pre-launched and actually started as an in-home tutoring company, and after discovering a lot of problems, we're building an online platform for on-demand tutoring.
I'm Rachel Thomas. I'm one of the founders of Subtext, and much like you a bit, we started as a commercial reader. So we're an iPad reader, so you can read books and socialize in the pages of books, and quickly discovered that classrooms were coming into the application and collaborative reading was taking place, and kind of saw the power of that. And so we're in the midst of focusing on the academic market.
Hi, my name is Pooja Sankar. I'm the CEO and founder of Piazza. Piazza is an online question and answer platform that students and teachers at all the top universities of the country are using to learn and teach better. And I started the idea when I was at Stanford Business School, coded the first version myself. I'm really excited where it's gone from there.
I also want to learn a little bit about what you guys are interested in getting out of this panel. So maybe you guys could tell me who out here is education technology entrepreneurs? Raise your hands. What about investors? So everybody pitch that guy immediately. And what about people just interested in technology and education and how they're converging? Awesome. So we'll try to keep this a little bit general, but also give some tips on how entrepreneurs can get their startups off the ground. So why don't we do a little bit of a deeper dive, and you guys can tell me a little bit more about what your products do, how you guys originally got founded, employee counts, funding, things like that, and then we'll get deeper into what you think you can teach the people here.
So before I founded Grockit, I was an educator for about 10 years in the public and private space. The instructional design that I used in my classroom was primarily social learning, so student-to-student learning facilitated by a teacher. And then at some point I decided to take that model online and try and get more than the 35, 40 kids I can fit in my classroom into that model. So we went and started doing test prep to start with, GMAT in particular. We've raised about $25 million now. Through a few rounds of financing with Benchmark Capital and some cool angels like Reid Hoffman and Mark Pincus. And so we've been pretty much at it since then. We do a lot of test prep. We have about, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the test prep market in a few of the different subjects that we're in right now. We then moved out of test prep into the K-12 world using the same platform where essentially students are working on problems together live. Synchronous in like a chat room type model. Since we launched, students have answered about 30 million questions together. This accounted for endless hours and hours of collaborative studying. We're sort of data crazy, so we've been able to see how two very low performing students working together get smarter. Two high-performing students working together get smarter. A low-performing student and a high-performing student both get smarter when they work together. So we've been able to see that social learning, we didn't invent it, it's a field of, subfield of psychology. So then more recently we moved out of test prep. We do collaboration around video, so you can take any YouTube video or any Vimeo video, for example, and create a collaborative Q&A where students are asking each other questions. We use the Popcorn JS, if you're familiar with that, to get a little geeky so that the questions are time-stamped throughout the video, so as you're watching the video, the questions start sort of magically appearing below it, and people can provide their answers to those questions. So that's where we are right now. We're about 30 employees. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we actually started as an in-home tutoring company in the Bay Area, matching up Stanford students with families. And what we found as we started building that out is that while in-home tutoring is successful, it is pretty restrictive. Most areas don't have a place like Stanford or like Harvard in Boston or Columbia in New York where you can source those really high-quality, well-educated tutors. We also found that it's very cost-restrictive, as well as you have to set up scheduling in advance. So in general, if you're using an in-home tutor, you have to have someone come to your house 2 days a week. Most people can't afford that and don't really need that. At the same time, there are a lot of students out there that do care about their grades, that do want to get that one-on-one instruction, and they may not need it for an hour, but just 20 minutes right before an assignment is due. And as we started thinking through the problem and actually having people reach out to us and say, hey, can I have a math tutor right now? We started working on how we could actually build out a platform for that. And sort of in the early tests that we've run, we found that we get a lot of people coming in at 11 o'clock at night, which is actually a perfect time to match them with a tutor from Harvard over video chat, because that is when college students are online and available. So we're still working through that. And right now we are at 5 employees and currently bootstrapped because the in-home tutoring company still runs.
So my co-founder, so we come from gaming backgrounds predominantly. So the idea here is, can you take social mechanics and you can take gaming mechanics and combine them in a way that is very interesting and will get everybody hopefully to read more and engage more over books. And when I say books, just to be clear, I mean trade books. So that's fiction and nonfiction that you would go buy on Amazon or from Google Books, et cetera, et cetera. So my co-founder ran a gaming company called Bandemic for about 10 years and sold it to EA a couple years ago, and then immediately began to fidget with, could he take gaming mechanics, kind of tried and true gaming mechanics, and get kids to read more. And then we got introduced, and I said, well, this should be more social. And I think this could be mass market. So where we ended up was we launched a mass market reader called Subtext, available on the iPad. And we partnered with Google Books, so any book you can buy via Google Books, you can read in Subtext. And we are a layer that sits over a book. So there's no DRM issues here. We're simply a layer of social and interactivity. And the two big core features in the app are we power Facebook-style conversations in the pages of the books. So that means, it kind of sounds, but you're a technical crowd, but asynchronous social reading. So you don't need to be on the same page at the same time to be socializing and having kind of deep engagement over a book. And the other thing we've done, we're the only actually reader on the market today that built a web browser into the app. So when you're reading, you can link out to anything on the web. So what that means is I can be reading Steve Jobs and see a reference to 1984, the commercial that kind of meant so much to many of us, and I can link out to it. And it's really crowdsourced enrichment of books. So that's where we started. And then we started to see a lot of teachers and librarians and classrooms going into the app. And the engagement was really exciting when you see a classroom using our tools in a book. So they're actually working as a group to understand the book and to debate the book. And engagement is wildly interesting. Most classrooms we have going in, an average student is leaving 70, 80, 90 notes in the book. So that's what really has driven us to focus on the education market. And in terms of size and funding, there's 12 of us on 3 continents, but that's another story. And we have $3 million in seed funding from NEA and Google Ventures and a couple of other lovely investment firms. So that's Subtext.
So why I started Piazza, I went to India in a very traditional part, grew up all my teenage years and college years, so traditional where my dad, really bent it that it's like, you don't speak to boys as you're growing up. And so I didn't know how to speak to boys when I was growing up. I went to IIT, which is a top engineering school in India, and studied computer science, but didn't know how to speak to boys, and there were only boys in my class. So I ended up doing all my homework assignments by myself, and as a result got stuck a lot. And Google and web forums out there could not help me and what I watched my classmates do was talk to one another and get help much faster. And so fast forward, came to America, did my master's in computer science at Maryland College Park, worked at Oracle as a software engineer, worked at Facebook as a software engineer, and went to Stanford Business School. It's something I thought I'd never do, but that's another story. When I was there, I was in an entrepreneurship class, got very inspired by my experience as one of the very few women in CS trying to study by myself, and realized that the problem was more prevalent. Today, many students buy laptops and are in their dorm rooms with internet and end up facing what I faced through my college years. So that's what inspired me between my first and second year of business school to build the first prototype by myself. Didn't know Ruby on Rails, picked up a book, and in 10 days built a version of it that I could show to professors and got the first set of users using it. Piloted in private beta to Stanford only for 1.5 years. And in 2011, opened up beyond Stanford when the feedback from instructors was it saved them 5 to 10 hours a week, which was news for me because I was only focused on the students. And this goes into distribution. It was a surprise. I wanted to help students get unstuck. But what I found building Piazza for 1.5 years was professors were saving 5 to 10 hours a week by knowing exactly what still needed their time and attention. And since then, in 2011, grew from what was 3,000 enrollments at Stanford to over 120,000 at the end of year. And this year alone, we've reached over 140,000 enrollments across hundreds of campuses in the US. What's most encouraging to me is students are spending an average of 3 to 4 hours a night. So while they are working on their class projects and assignments every night, they're keeping Piazza open as their avenue to staying connected to all the discussion that's going on with their classmates.
Great, those are all really interesting stories. Could you guys tell me what were some of the things that helped you most in getting your companies off the ground in terms of really starting a company in the education space? Was it being in education beforehand? Was it finding the right co-founders? Was it learning to code? What were the kind of things that really made it a lot easier for you and that might pose stumbling blocks to potential edutech entrepreneurs if they didn't get that background first? Or just go around whatever you guys.
For me, it was totally learning, coding. I don't think I could have accomplished what I did if I hadn't the experience I had in coding for multiple years in the Silicon Valley.
So I would give the same advice to any entrepreneur, which everybody hears all the time, so forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but if you don't feel really passionate about what you're doing, you just shouldn't do it, because passion can get you over almost any hill. So we started with the idea that collaborative reading could really move mountains. People would learn more, and that no single reader knows everything about what they're reading. And the name of the company is Subtext, and the idea is if you read by yourself, you're often missing the subtext. And not only that, you're missing kind of social connections that you would make if you were reading with someone from a different area or with a different experience. And that's what reading is about the struggles of the human heart. So if you're reading with other people, you're getting more access to other struggles and kind of more context. So for me, it really comes down to are you passionate about it, or are you doing it with people you're passionate about? And in my case, I'm very fortunate. I wake up every morning and go, wow, I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And I get on Skype with my co-founder, Andrew, who is equally passionate about what we're doing. And I really think that it all starts there.
For us, I think the biggest thing was really getting to know the market hands-on before starting to build a product. So we were very fortunate in being able to connect with parents and students and tutors from a very early stage and understand their needs and where those needs weren't getting met, and also figure out how to attract people on both sides of the market, so both the students and the tutors, and really learn what the kind of things they were responsive to and how they would actually interact with our product before we built it. Then by the time we started building it, we already had our core user base that we could go after to start testing, which is pretty awesome.
I think for me, like I said earlier, being an educator for about a decade before I started Grockit was really important. I've had thousands and thousands of students, and I guess probably more parents because they each have 2 parents, so lots of parents that I've dealt with. I've been a bit of an entrepreneur since I was a kid. My first startup I did when I was 18 or so. It's still running in Michigan. I think that was the other thing. I just have an entrepreneurial bug. If entrepreneurship is something that is does not get you up in the morning, then I would stay as far away from entrepreneurship as possible, because I think the only reward is that it satisfies some innate need you have to behave this way. If you do not have that innate need, yeah, it's probably not satisfying to force yourself to have it. So yeah, being an educator for a while, just needing to be an entrepreneur. We're sort of data crazy at Grockit, like I said earlier, and I think one of the challenges in education is that like even a company like Twitter or even a company like Facebook, they don't have to prove that anything they do does anything. They have metrics, they're data crazy. Facebook has tons and tons of servers just dedicated to data. But they don't have to prove that by using Facebook you get smarter or you learn something that you didn't know before. And we've always had that challenge. And so for us, having a product that's steeped in psychological research and social learning, decades of research in it, to show that when people use it, they get provably better at what they're trying to do. So our chief learning architect publishes papers in peer-reviewed journals, and so that makes it a lot harder. But if you're sort of steeping what you're doing in real psychological research, I think you can pull it off.
So it sounds like some of the core learnings there, being able to code, being truly passionate about your product, being able to have somebody at least on your team who's spent significant time actually being an educator so they can really see that they know the space firsthand, and then also getting out of the building and making sure that you're actually testing your product as you build it so you're not just building blindly for what you imagine that somebody would want. Now I want you guys to make sure you can always you can join in on the conversation by using the hashtag Technapex, TECHNAPEX, or the at reply that, and you'll see your tweets up there, and we'll also be able to take a look at those. And if somebody could give me a few minutes heads up when we're getting close to the end, we'll take questions, and you guys can also leave your questions up through the tweets. So back to what, Allison, you were talking about getting out of the building and trying to test your product. Maybe you guys could all talk a little bit about that experience. Like when you first build your prototypes, how do you go from that first prototype to like a finished product? And how are you, getting off on the ground and talking to people who would actually be the potential users for your product and seeing what they want? Like were you watching over their shoulder as they tried it? Were you doing surveys? How are you getting this sort of data and information?
So I guess I'll start since I started talking about that and I can speak less to the final product. But in terms of getting it off the ground, one of the most useful tools that we've had since an early stage is Olark, which lets you build live chat into your website. And what that allowed us to do from a very early stage is have users come in and be looking for certain features that they couldn't get on our initial website. And they start asking us about it. So we would get those questions when I was online at 11 o'clock at night. Like, hey, can you help me with 2 math problems right now? It's sort of like, no, I can't really, but maybe we could figure out a way to do that. Okay, how would you like that to work? Like, what would that look like to you? And we continue to use that to this day, and we talk to users basically almost every day because they have features that they want to see and don't see them, and they're asking about it, and that's really helped us to shape what we're driving. In terms of actually bringing users on in an early place, what we found is by launching a series of very minimum viable websites, we can basically experiment with a bunch of small features by bringing in 5 users via Google AdWords and having them land on our site and seeing what they do. So we've been able to identify a lot of issues with early UX before launching.
That's a great idea, using ads to bring in test users and then really tracking and seeing what they're doing.
Also great, as most of you probably know, for message testing. I'm just saying, also great for message testing, former life. So doing lots of naming and messaging testing on Facebook is very powerful just to figure out what works and what doesn't. So we're in the very kind of fortunate position where we have a live app on the App Store, and classrooms have found us. So we're able to watch them in the app very closely and see what they're doing. So we are anecdotally watching them in the app because we have a community manager who's kind of shepherding and helping them along and seeing what their engagement looks like. And then we also have some data coming in around their engagement as well. So that's certainly where we're starting. And then it's boots on the ground. So I am talking to heads of technology in different districts. I'm talking to reading specialists, reading teachers, anyone who will speak to me. I'm sitting down across the table from and showing them the app and getting their input. And we're also doing some focus grouping that's being put together, not surprisingly. And then just fun things. So we're running a contest that's about to start. So if you're a teacher in the room, where we're giving 10 free iPads to teachers based on entering a contest where they say how they would use our app in their classroom. And then we're pushing people into the app, and we have 4 books set up as examples of the kind of sketchbook of possibilities for teachers. So we're showing how the tool works in a very controlled environment, and then we are linking to SurveyMonkey and kind of getting their input there. But it's definitely got to be a combination of things. But again, we're in a very fortunate position where we actually have classrooms kind of in using it, and that's where a lot of our learning is taking place.
I'd love to speak to my first year of learning, so 2009, and it was a lot of iterative development, to Josh's point of how we get to now users spending 4 hours on average every night. But initially I thought only women face this problem, women in India, and then I found out women even at Stanford and MIT face this problem when I spoke to them at Facebook. And then I went over the streets to Stanford and found out boys face this problem too, where they feel lonely and are stuck and are texting in frustration the couple of friends they know in the class. So the first step for me was broadening the user base, the audience, and the problem in general that students today were facing. 6 months later, I had wireframes that I thought would work, and I built that, and by September, gave it to a class, and it was barely used. So the first thing I decided to do was offer gift cards to these users in this one class, and just try to understand, what was confusing about Piazza? Why were they not using it? Why were they not asking questions? And the most basic feedback was coming back. I didn't know Piazza was a place to ask questions. It's like, oh, okay, that's great feedback. Make it really bold now. But iteration of the sort of talking to users and trying to understand why they weren't even performing the most basic actions that I expected they would started getting us to the point where in 4 months it was 12 questions. In 1 week it was 50 questions 3 months later. And after that, it was 1,000 questions. And the rate of questions and contributions coming in per week started going up rapidly because of my talking to hundreds of users. I actually talked to a lot of users on the phone and in person. We kept it very closed, only to a handful of classes at Stanford, so that I could go across the street, sit down with them, and watch them confused or struggling to try to use Piazza. And it was really amazing with the designers and engineers we had on the team to iterate based on the feedback and see number of contributions per week. The one metric I was monitoring, not users, not anything else, but just contributions per week among the same user base and how that was going up.
That's great to hear that you guys are all taking that approach of really trying to find out what was wrong with your app, and not instead of thinking oh, what am I doing great, but think what you're screwing up and then try to work those problems out. I think that's really crucial. So we're fortunate that all 4 of you guys have taken different distribution approaches to getting user growth on your apps, be it going through teachers and trying to get them to distribute the app, releasing it free on the App Store, pushing it from in certain peer groups, or going college by college. So maybe you guys could each talk about what was your approach to getting user growth, and then from there, why do you think that that's the best way you could do it, or if you could do it again, what strategy would you use to make sure that you're always getting more people getting onto the app and you don't stagnate?
For us, it was teachers, and that came again as a surprise. But teachers actually bring in a large percentage of his or her students into Piazza, and that results in very high participation and engagement. I thought it would spread through students, and students would just start using it at handfuls of themselves, but it turns out students like knowing that teachers can watch over other students and make sure the answers that students are providing are correct. And as a result, these teachers at conferences are spreading the word for us, where their one claim is Piazza helps me save 5 to 10 hours a week. And you should use this. Students answer questions on your behalf. You no longer have to answer every single question. You don't get the same 10 questions in email because everyone can see each other's questions. And so it was more of an insight when I heard a TA say that Piazza saves me 5 to 10 hours a week. It was just a huge surprise.
So do you reach out to teachers directly and sort of market to them first now?
We do, but we also ask our current teachers to spread the word, and it turns out that because they have such a good experience, they like to spread the word. So one professor, Dan Garcia of Berkeley, is part of a mailing list of computer science educators. He blasted the entire mailing list saying, I sat in this room, saw a 40-minute demo, blown away. I've been teaching 19 years, and I have not seen anything that solves all my needs as well as Piazza does. And so he was eager to actually get the word out to other educators.
So how do you communicate with those educators to get that message hey, please tell your teacher friends about it?
It's interesting. I'm very genuine when I look for feedback because to the core I'm a product person, and I think professors enjoy that and they want to help spread the word when they see that there's this founder who's very excited about solving the problem, and they want to help, but I've never had to be very explicit where it's turned off a professor that I'm asking for them to spread the word. They want to do it because they see that we're iterating so much behind the scenes for them.
So are you guys emailing them, calling them in person?
I fly and meet them too.
Awesome. Great. Anybody else want to talk about their distributions?
I guess we'll go down the line maybe. Go down the line maybe. So we're very similar in that we believe teachers are the tip of the iceberg. So our focus is on teachers right now. And one of the things that's really interesting, everybody has to learn about their own ecosystem, and I won't claim I fully understand ours. We're learning as we go, but we're really, at this point, we're driving iPad adoption. So we're kind of winding on iPad adoption. So there are a couple thousand schools in the United States who have one-to-one iPad programs, so that makes your focus to start very real. So we are reaching out kind of directly to schools with one-to-one iPad programs, and then where are they? So they've invested a lot of money in iPads. They have a one-to-one program, and they need to justify the technology in the classroom. So they're actually very hungry to learn about new technologies and new ways that they can teach. So from that perspective, they're a very receptive audience, and we're also in the nice position that you mentioned this earlier. We're freemium, so we're free to get started. So we're also learning that's very interesting to educators as well, because if you're a paid app, you start at the district level, where the district has to approve that you're an expenditure. If you're a free app, you actually are more likely to get grassroots uptake, right? So teachers can find you, discover you, talk about you, and begin to use you. So just one consideration, depending on kind of your path into the market, the bigger the expenditure and the more pronounced impact it will have on the district or the state, the higher up the food chain you go, and the more the institutional sell-in is required. So if you have a free app and you're selling into schools that already have a device, for example, that's an easier sell cycle. And then I would only say, and everybody knows this, but you really have to think about your audience. So the more I talk to teachers, and this is not a criticism of teachers, this is a reality of teachers, they want to desperately be better educators. If they have technology in their classroom, they want to use it intelligently, but they also want to make their lives a lot easier. So to your point, the efficiency, right? So you really need to be able to say, here are very real ways this product makes you a better teacher and makes your life easier. And we won't maybe get into this at some point, but there's also the issue, are people making decisions because of quality education, or are they making decisions because of economics? And the reality is probably both. So at some point, happy to speak to kind of how that all comes together.
Sure. So targeting educators, and then also finding people who, or education systems that are using the medium that whatever your product is built on. So if that's an iPad, finding somebody who has iPads in their schools. So what about you guys?
So again, we're still super early, but we've actually found some success in selling directly to college students. They're a really great demographic in that they tend to be early adopters, and they tend to be very social in terms of how they talk about schoolwork. So what we found is that we can actually go after core social groups, so whether that be a fraternity or the math club and whatever that is, and if we can reach out to them and sort of have that high-touch interaction with them early on, students talk to students about school. You get that moment where someone's like, oh yeah, I was really struggling with my econ problem set last night, and then I got some nerd from Harvard to help me out. And that's literally what we hear people saying. And so they're going and telling their friends that. So we see a bunch of people that are starting to spread the word virally within schools. And because college students tend to be interested in checking out new technology, it makes it a little bit easier on our end.
Yeah, education technology has a huge advantage there because it's really solving a very acute pain point, and you're also talking about a group of people who are so well connected that if you can solve and erase that friction from their life, they're going to tell all their friends. So I think making sure that your product is something that it doesn't have to be just spread from teacher to teacher, but if you can get your users to be able to spread it for you, I think that's really crucial as well. And so what about you? How are you guys doing it with Grockit?
I think most of our distribution is word of mouth. We do some SEM stuff that works for us in terms of it makes money.
So search engine marketing.
Yep, and but most of the app is distributed from person to person. And I think I'm a big Seth Godin fan, so I'm all about trying to create a remarkable product. And his definition of remarkable is a product that people remark on, so they talk about it to other people. It's not remarkable as in great. It's actually remarkable. So I think that's the primary focus, is making a remarkable product. And then I think that, in terms of if your users are the channel for your growth, then the ones that do the best at that are just the ones that are inherently require you to bring other people for it to work. So I think like a GroupMe is a great example. GroupMe does nothing unless you bring people into it. There's not even people in there for you to talk to. You have to bring a group of people into it and use this product together, so they can grow very quickly. So unless viral mechanics are not so much something I think that you slap on top of some product that does something. In the situations that it works the best is when it actually has to do with how you extract value from the product.
So that relates into my next question about the technologies that you guys have integrated. Which technologies, from things like push notifications, viral mechanics, using the social graph to bring in the peers or the people that somebody knows, like what of those things or any other sort of technology solutions have you guys integrated that you found really powerful and that you would recommend other edutech startups integrate into their own products?
I would say, I've never really heard a particularly good reason to start without using like Facebook Connect or Twitter Connect to start as your account system. It's usually very fast for developers to implement it. Even if you have great developers, it's usually faster for them to just implement Facebook Connect than it is for them to just build out even like using Ruby's or Rails standard, account options initially, because it gives you pictures of the person, it gives you some information about them. So I think using that stuff, even when you're prototyping, is really important. I think a lot of times people think like, oh, later on we'll add Facebook Connect so we can get viral growth through Facebook, but we actually just use it as a utility to make it very quick to get up and running and start using it. I don't know if that's what you're asking. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, students are super busy and they don't want to fill in another profile, upload another profile picture. So if you can build off of something where you can just drag those that data from somewhere else, I think you get people right into the heart of your product instead of worrying about the sign up. What about you guys? Any other tech you thought was really useful?
Yeah, so we launched, again, because we were more of a mass market, so we launched with Twitter and Facebook, and since we're integrated with Google Books, Gmail was an obvious option for us as well. Fortunately, Gmail continues to be a very great option for us because Google Apps and Gmail actually have incredible penetration across schools, so that's a great place to start. But then I'd recommend looking at social networks developed for schools. So there's Edmodo and Schoolology and a number of social networks developed for schools, and the advantage for us is, again, with teachers being our core focus to start, as a teacher signs up, we can actually pull in the entire classroom as they sign up. So now the teacher and the classroom are actually automatically set up and connected in the app. So again, this idea of ease of use, but also finding social graphs that are particularly relevant for your audience, I think is very valuable. So we had that moment where now we're not a mass market, we're an education platform, so where do you find education graphs that are really interesting? And again, Edmodo and Schoolology and some of those other players are great places to start. And Edmodo, for example, has just started to open up Edmodo Connect, so they're really starting to lean into that. And then they have some interesting features now where we can actually post content back out onto Edmodo. So I think looking for those types of opportunities are very valuable.
Yeah, so edutech and startups can look past Facebook and Twitter and look for specific social graphs built around education to be able to pull in classrooms extra quickly. Anything that you guys have found helpful, Pooja?
We did implement push. So when you've got your browser open and a new question is asked, then it's actually pushed to you. You see the question in real time. And that's been huge. When it's answered, it goes from an unanswered mark to an answered mark in real time. When there are updates and new contributions, new questions, whatever is happening, everything. You even see a little bit of how many people are online now with you in the corner of the website. And that's really powerful. I hear a student say, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy at 4 a.m. when I'm working on my assignment and I see 20 other people awake with me.
Yeah, so whether that's push on a website so that you've got little buttons popping up that say what's going on else on the site, new activity that a user might be interested in, or if that's on mobile and you're actually sending them push notifications that can re-engage them, alert them to when friends sign up. And I think a really huge one is those sort of monthly re-engagement push notifications or email digests, things where people tune out of things. They forget about the apps that they have on their phone. But if you send them something like, hey, 5 of your friends asked questions and got them answered on our service this month, that reminds them like, hey, this is helping my friends, so it'll probably help me too, and I should check it out. So what are some of the areas that you think are ripe for disruption or big markets where there's big potential for education technology startups to come in? Like what industries are sort of having evolved for technology, and somebody out there who is thinking about like what could I do in the education space? What are some of the things you've come across that seem stodgy and need to be rebuilt?
Well, I don't know if this is stodgy, but this is a new opportunity for sure, is the ability for opening up your classrooms. We're finding many professors taking Piazza and not keeping it confined to the university email addresses that are enrolled through their traditional course management system, but deciding to open it up to students in different countries or different universities in America. Particular reasons could be it's an advanced subject matter, and they see an opportunity where other students don't have the privilege of learning the subject matter from professors in their universities. So that's been really fascinating for us, actually, just learning how professors are using Piazza to do that.
I actually think that's a really great point. So as we're talking to schools, one of the big things is safety, of course. They want to be able to support closed groups where only the classroom and the teacher can engage with each other. But then it begins to beg the question, are there opportunities beyond that? So what can we do to support teacher-to-teacher engagement? So I don't think a fifth grade teacher in Illinois should be able to see what a fifth grade teacher in Palo Alto is doing, and they should be able to share lesson plans and build on each other. So how are we creating tools for teachers to be more effective, I think is one. And then how are we expanding the idea of how could it be safe but also more open? I think is also very interesting. So why can't a school, again in Palo Alto, maybe a high-income school, be reading with a low-income school in New York and learning from each other? And so how do we have tools that just support safety but are also more open, and how do we have tools that support teachers doing much more interesting collaboration than I think they're able to do today?
So one of the things that we think a lot about is how do you help people learn in their own individual way? My mom's a third grade teacher, and she always talks about how one student will totally understand something when she teaches it this way, and another student will totally understand it when she teaches it that way. And right now we're seeing a bunch of platforms emerge which are great. They let people learn at their own pace. You see the Khan Academies of the world. And I think the next step is in taking that and allowing people to learn both at their own pace and in their own way. And you're starting to see an emergence of startups that are covering that, but there's a bunch of potential in this space.
I don't know what you guys think. What is a huge, old, stodgy, slow-moving industry in the education world? Textbooks. So there we go. My answer is textbooks.
Awesome. So what's one thing that you guys, as a final question from me, what's one thing that you screwed up and that you fixed in the process? And try to keep it super short, but just like... I know this is education, so you're learning the whole time and therefore screwing up the whole time. But no, I'm sure there's something specific that was like, wow, I wish I had known that beforehand.
So we thought that people wanted to also study on their own, so we added that functionality. And then we sat back, like I said, we're data crazy, so we take a look at the data there. And it turns out that people will spend 3 times longer studying in a group. They'll answer twice the amount of content. And their accuracy actually goes up by at least 10%. So we actually found that the people didn't want to study alone. They wanted to study with others.
That's a great stat. 3 times longer spent studying when you're studying with a group.
Oh, God, I can't really think. Sorry. You learn so much every day. I know that sounds like such a platitude. I'm full of... But there's constant mistakes and constant iteration. And if you're actually not willing to fall down every day and pick yourself up and try again, you should be doing something else. We're constantly learning and kind of scratching our heads. I think the biggest thing, quite candidly, when I look at our product is it's really robust. So here's the good part. It's actually the most robust reading app on the market today. Like, I can actually say that hands down, no one has the same technology we do from a reading standpoint. So that's the upside. The downside is we launched with a user interface and a user experience that was not simple enough. So we had a very, very robust technology that people kind of had to scratch their heads a little bit before they engaged with. So that was probably our biggest learning, like how do we take it and just... We actually had a 2-month exercise. What can we strip away? How can we make it simpler? How can we dumb it down? And by the way, not because our consumers are dumb. You're dumb when you're a consumer. I'm dumb when I'm a consumer. I want it to be easy. I don't want to think. And so we really had to challenge ourselves and kind of get out of our own heads and figure out how to strip away. And we ultimately ended up with, I think, a lot better product. But I think that's a big challenge, and we'll always be doing that. Like, how do you have something that's really robust and really sophisticated in the way it works, and it just feels really easy to everybody using it?
Great.
And so...
When our team was small and 3 people, we were really good at diligence on, rigorousness on what we're thinking of building. Is it the most basic version of what we should try to test before we start adding more pieces to what our idea is? And I would say, I can't use a stronger word as screwed up, but one challenge that I've gone through is when the team has grown and more designers and more engineers have come on, it's been a bit difficult to bring in the same level of rigor, which is, no, any feature you build has to be the very basic minimum, and how can we test some assumptions we're making, because everything we're trying, it has baked in assumptions. So as we grew, that was one thing I think we could have done better.
Great. So I'd like to take just a few questions in the last few minutes that we have. So does anybody have something that they're a burning question to ask our panelists? Back there?
Yeah, so when you were bringing on all of these new users, how did you manage a lot of the support that you had to do? I mean, as a small team with all the questions about this updated technique, how did you deal with educating your users on how to do it right and then scale that option?
Great. So the question is, how do you support all the user growth that you have? Like, how do you offer customer support as your customer base grows?
Get satisfaction.
Get satisfaction. Yeah, there's easy plug-in customer service systems.
Answer their own questions.
So there's Zendesk, there's Get Satisfaction.
Zendesk, Get Satisfaction. Let people answer their own questions and answer each other's questions instead of having to spend the time yourself.
Our one difference, though, for 1.5 years, we stayed private to Stanford for that reason, that we wanted the user base to be very small so I could read every email coming in and actually do a back and forth interaction over in-person, phone call, whatever. And only when we actually solved 95% of common complaints or requests, we opened up beyond Stanford.
Anybody else? Awesome. Well, a few key takeaways that we had today. So some things that people thought were essential for starting a great technology education company included being able to code, being super passionate, having educators on your team, and getting out of the building. And then some technologies that people think are super useful, Facebook and Twitter for your profiles, and make sure that you can also look into education-specific social graphs so that you can pull in whole classrooms at a time. And then in terms of things that you want to make sure you're doing as you grow is keeping customer support correct. Keep it as simple as possible, because overcomplicating your product is the worst thing you can do. And just remember that if you really care about it day in and day out, if you start with a product that you're truly sure can change the world and will make you happy if you change the world that way, you're going to be able to get over any hurdle. So thank you so much to TriplePoint for putting this on, to Technapex. A big thank you to all of our panelists. That's Grockit, InstaEDU, Subtext, and Piazza. So make sure to go check out those companies as well. And feel free to come up and talk to us if you have any more questions. Thanks again.